Good day, everyone, and welcome to 3HAG Way webinar series, year 2, part 1, 3HAG and execution. Super excited to roll this into year 2. We know that once you start working on your 3HAG, you really should never stop. Every day, week, month, year, quarter, we are rolling it forward. So let's get at it. So why year 2? I think the biggest reason why we decided to go forward with year 2 was because we just got through all the steps in year 1, and quite frankly, you got to go back around. The whole idea behind year 2 is to iterate and evolve and to drive the confidence you need to make great decisions to execute in the direction you want to go for all the success that you're looking for. So this was what we covered off in part 1. We did it step by step. In year 2, we're going to step through what do you do next in each of these steps. What would be other tools you could use to actually create clarity and confidence in order to make your best decisions on how to move the organization forward. So we finished off the last session in part 1, confirming our 3HAG and talking about iterating and evolving. Well, one of the things that is most important is that once we have our 3HAG is really to step back through it, but also tie it to our execution decisions, our execution planning, and obviously execution itself. So as we work through and step by step, we are executing along the way. So things will evolve as the external world evolves around us. That's why we have certain tools to keep that analysis in front of us. And we have some internal tools to keep that analysis in front of us. So I think if the message wasn't clear when you finish off, year 1, we're going to continue with year 2 with continuing to iterate and evolve. So quick intro. I kept this slide in just to let people know about the coach certification program. We are capping the number of coaches at 60. We are currently at 50. You can see I have seats available, more than 50, but more than 60, excuse me. But once we fill the next 10 seats, we are done. We are full for now until such time we decide as a group to add more coaches. So we have Costa Rica. The new date and place on there is Dublin, Ireland. I'll be there working with Paulo Kelly on a few workshops in Dublin, and we have decided to add a 2-day certification in Dublin, Ireland. It is the week of April 28th. I'm just trying to nail down the exact 2 days in that week as Paul is working on the schedule of the other events for that week. So please stay tuned. If you are interested, please go ahead and register at metronomeunited.com under 3HAG certification application. As well, we've got some dates for Sydney, Australia, March 20th and 21st. If you are interested in those dates, please go ahead and register. And we have 2 seats left in Atlanta, May 17th and 18th. So we're looking forward to continuing on certifying new coaches. It's been great process, both learning and interacting and getting to know all the coaches that are out there that are highly interested and implementing the 3HAG way. If you're a company listening in and you're looking for a coach, we do have 3HAG certified coaches. Don't hesitate to reach out. I know we've been taking some inquiries as of late, and we look forward to finding you a great three-head coach in your area. So a little bit about myself, a serial entrepreneur, founded 2 companies. The 3HAG way was born in Paradata Systems. It was validated in PayPros, Subservio, and DST, and continues to be validated every day within my coaching practice, and hopefully your companies and your coaching practices as well. So it has been an incredible year in 2018. 2019, we look forward to it being an even bigger year with more coaches being involved and impacting more leaders, driving their 3HAGs and impacting their lives. So key objectives of today, we're going to touch in on strategy as we always do. We're going to talk about and reiterate the definition of a 3HAG. We're going to talk about confirming and evolving. We're going to talk about how the strategic analysis fits into that. And of course, how strategy and execution meet. And it actually meets in a very unlikely place within this system. And I want to make sure that that is truly clear and we understand how to tie the two together, both in the day, the week, the month, the quarter, and the years going forward. So let's kick it off. Michael Porter's definition of strategy. We've touched on this many times. The picture we're trying to create, I use this definition because it's simple to remember. I can actually see a picture of the creation of a unique and valuable position for your company. It's involving a different set of activities. So it's an interdependent set of activities. This is the key. It's not one of having these 4 non-dependent activities in place. It's a set of activities that differentiate the organization and creates a unique and valuable position. So what do you think about competition? I love this. I was trained in sport to compete to be the best. I was trained in actually school, business school led me to believe this as well. But thankfully, Michael Porter's competitive advantage sort of struck a chord in our first organization, and we realized that we needed to create a unique and valuable position, and we are competing to be unique. We are looking to take the best action that we could create in a strategy that would avoid competing with rivals on the same dimension. And so that is very key. We're looking to get on our own dimension, competing with no one else and serving our core customers' needs at a profit. So most companies do some of the strategic analysis. All companies execute. The key is we need to continuously drive a strategic analysis and tie it to our execution. Our strategic analysis should help provide us with a way to simply state our strategy, create that unique and valuable position that we can see, identify the differentiating set of activities, and then what we want to do in our day-to-day is we want to line up our execution to our strategy. So if we look at the 6 systems that are involved in every business out there, we have our cultural system powered by Jim Collins, BHAG, his hedgehog. We know the leader is the foundation of the organization. We have our core purpose, our core values, and we have our 10+ year goal. We then have our cohesive system. That's going to drive our high performing team. We power this up with Pat Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions. As well, we have our human system. This is how we attract, coach, keep, grow, reward A players, powered by the top grading framework. This is all sandwiched together with our team leaders. At the very top of the house is our team who holds the reputation of our organization in the marketplace. Everything that goes on with our team in the marketplace and all the feedback they receive must flow into the organization. Everything that happens within our thinking and planning around the organization must flow back through the team leaders to the team for execution. Now, that small gap in between execution system and the strategic system is our 3HAG. This is how we actually ensure that we can cover off that gap, that we can map between our strategy and our execution and create a system that will never end and that will allow us to get better and better and better. And of course, at the very core of every organization is our cash system and our ability to forecast cash in a way that we can actually week over week, month over month, drive our company forward for the success we're looking for. This is a growth system framework. This is how companies out there have been clearly and confidently growing their companies and having fun doing it. So if we think about this, what are they having fun doing? They're having fun at getting better at predicting the future. This is all about predictability. And Vern Harnish's one-page plan was a great way for us to show that growth in our quarter, in our year, in our 3-year, and in our 10-year. That's where we got our big, hairy, audacious goal from Jim Collins. We got our 3-year highly achievable goal from myself and my team. And then we have our execution, our 1-year, our corporate 90-day, and our individual 90-day. We've got to line this up not with our budget, but with our forecast. We must be able to forecast the future. We have to forecast our cash, our profit, our expenses, our revenue, and of course, our widgets. And once we can forecast our non-financial widgets, the things that flow through our organization that actually creates our revenue and will contribute to our expenses and our profit, and of course, the cash in the bank. These two things go hand in hand. One can't live without the other. So the definition of a 3HAG is a strategic execution system that drives confidence in predicting the future growth of your company and making it happen. As a coach, that's what I'm doing with organizations. We're actually driving confidence. We're getting better at predicting the future growth of their company, and then we get focused and we make it happen. So the missing link in all this was not the 5-year super wild ass guess. Super wild ass guesses really cause us to actually plan on a place to nowhere. And we'll get great at driving around the block, but we won't get to where we want to go. We really need to reach out and touch the future with our 3-year highly achievable goal. This is our key stepping stone to ensuring our 10 to 30-year goal is achievable and believable. This is the missing link. So what we're going to talk about today as we roll forward is everything to the right-hand side of the 3-year highly achievable goal is all about execution. And how do we ensure that everything we do on our annual plan, our 90-day corporate, our 90-day individual, and our 30-day individual continuously stays aligned with our 3HAG and our BHAG. The whole idea behind this is to simplify, simplify, simplify. How do we do that? We do it through strategic pictures. This is a way for us as coaches and companies to actually allow a great story to be told. One that not only the CEO can tell, but everybody on the team. It drives alignment. We need alignment of the leaders to be able to tell the story, and then the leaders are telling that story to their team members, and the team members are able to actually understand and make great decisions on it. It helps drive focus, it creates clarity, and above all, we have confidence in the decisions we're making as we drive towards our 3-year highly achievable goal. So when we think about this, we used in year 1 of this webinar series our step-by-step 3HAG way. I absolutely encourage, as you know, we're never going to stop stepping through these steps. But we must do that in all the strategic evolution we're going to do by stepping through these. We must keep it aligned to our execution and our capabilities of executing today, in the week, in the month, in the quarter, and the year. So that's why I always show this left to right, our foundational view of our core values, core purpose, our BHAG, tying in our 3HAG, and then ensuring that what we do every day is driving to where we want to go, not driving around the block. So let's jump into it. So a lot of companies out there are playing a blurry game. And what I mean by that is that the teams have an idea of where they want to go, but they don't have clarity. They have an idea of what each of their functional areas should do, but they're not doing it together. They're not doing it where they can see each other execute, like you would on the field. If you were actually on a field and not a blurry field, you'd be able to look across a field and see that other functional team. This is what we're driving for. We're driving for clarity. Both the coaches who are on the bench, looking in on the game, being able to see it all being played, being able to provide the feedback and the coaching feedback required to actually move the company forward for the win. If I'm the coach of this leadership team and the leadership team is the coach of the team on the field, I'm sitting up in the stands. I want to be able to see the game clearly so I can help the leaders make the best decisions on executional decisions on where they want to drive the company to. So in order to do that, we need foundational tools we can use every day. We need an organizational and functional view that has clarity. Just like the lineup on the soccer field, we need clarity, functional clarity of the lineup and the design of the organization and how we're going to make money. We need aligned priorities, our BHAG, our 3HAG, our 1HAG, and our 90-day corporate goals aligned to our individual goals, aligned to our 30-day goals. We need to have a visible everyday score. You don't get to the end of a soccer game and look up at the scoreboard and they flick up the score and go, oh shoot, we lost. That just doesn't happen. In a soccer game and any game we watch, we're constantly looking at the scoreboard. We're looking at the time left in the game. We're looking at how, if we're winning or losing, and we're making decisions in the moment on what best we should do to try and win the game. And those calls are coming from the field, the players on the field. They're also coming from the coaching staff on the sidelines. So this is all about making better, faster decisions and ensuring there's accountable behavior on and off the field. We have to ensure we have team accountable behavior, that the team win is more important than the individual wins. So when we look at this, BHAG, 3HAG, our 12-month plan that has certain priorities, it doesn't have to be 5, but you're going to have 1 or 2 or 3. Some companies have 5, depending on the size of their leadership team and their capacity. And then we have our 90-day, we have our 90-day individual and our 30-day individual. The key to actually creating a plan aligned to our 3HAG is it must be specific. That sounds super obvious, I know, but it's got to be specific, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Now, as much as I've been on a team and a CEO and part of a team, and a part of a team creating priorities, when I became a coach, I was very surprised that priorities weren't written down as SMART priorities. So SMART being specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And so the examples of the priorities on the right-hand side of this screen is to recruit an inside sales leader by October 21st, 2016, owner Brad Scott. Very clear if we are going to achieve that or not. We'll know how to celebrate it. I always check in when we're writing priorities for me now as a coach with the teams I'm working with. I always ask, how would you know if we achieved that? How would we know if we were going to celebrate that? There's nothing worse than having a priority you work towards for 90 days and then having another 90-minute discussion as to whether you achieved it or not. That's not the point of priorities. Priorities are very specific. They are, they're going to state exactly what you want to achieve. There's going to be a measurable way to test the progress along the way. These are achievable. They're realistic, that we can accomplish those, and they have a specific time frame. So priorities are all about clearing a clear start and end point. We want to align them to where we're going. We want to focus on outcomes, and we need clear ownership. Now, tied to this is definitely how our metrics, how we're going to measure where we're going. So we want to predict and measure progress. We want to ensure that we have horizontal and vertical measures, meaning horizontal across daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually, and vertical meaning that into each month, each actually day, week, month, quarter, year, that not only the company has some really top measures, but into the functional areas, we have measures of success that we have predicted and now that we think we need for an outcome for our plan, and we are measuring our progress against that. So it's really important that we are not only tracking, I see lots of metrics out there that, people are tracking, what's happening, but they don't know if they're winning or losing the game because they didn't forecast what a win looks like. I can't stress enough, in order to have great metrics, financial and non-financial metrics, you've got to forecast what you want the measure to be and then track the progress against it. So if I was truly working with a company and working through this, I would actually reiterate this almost every time we go to make a plan till it's actually ingrained in the team and they know exactly, they get better and better at actually creating the plan. Before we would start creating the plan, we would do three things. And I think if anyone on this, watching this, knows me well enough, I don't like to status things in meetings. I think we should be coming into a meeting already having our plan status so we can talk about the status, not telling everybody what the status is. So I would have a slide up. I would actually go to Metronome Growth Systems, the platform that I use with all my clients, and most three-head coaches use with their clients. And I would bring that up at this point and we would review the status. It takes a few minutes. I would then do the same of the last quarterly plan. Now these slides are blank because I would literally leave this in the deck I was working through to remind myself not to skip that point, but to go to Metronome Growth Systems, just to click over and go, is this status correct? Does everybody agree? Is there anything that is not as it should be in, our plan, quarterly and annually? Okay, from there, then I would already have, before I walked into this quarterly planning session, I would have already asked for strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats from the leaders. Now, different than some gazelles coaches would have learned, what we did with the SWOT is we did it every 90 days. Every 90 days, the leadership team did a SWOT analysis. And one of the things that we did is we actually asked our teams, our functional teams that we were leading, to do a SWOT analysis on the company. And each of the leaders would bring the feedback from that preparation with their teams into the leadership team meeting. And we would articulate the top strengths, 1 to 3, sometimes we would have up to 5. We would do the same with the weaknesses. We would do the same with the opportunities and threats. This helps us manage the expectations and what is going to actually ensure what things could come true that will help us make our plan. What are the things that could threaten us making the plan? What are the things we need to get better at internally and what are the things that we can leverage that we're already good at with our strengths. So we would do this every quarter. As a coach, I do this every quarter with the teams I coach. We never create a quarterly plan without doing a SWOT analysis. So before we get into planning the annual and quarterly plan, I usually ask this question before we get into it. And I ask this question is, what is the one question that must be answered, explored, or addressed to move the company forward? And I want them to answer this question with a question. So it could be, how do we solve XYZ? What should we do about ABC? But it's just trying to get the teams to get focused on the things they need to look at in order to move the company forward. And forward meaning forward in the direction towards their 3HAG. So these slides aren't really fancy. There's nothing fancy about any of this. It's just to do with the process that we want to take the team through every time. If you're a company listening in, if you're a leadership team listening in, these are key questions you should answer every quarter. If you're a coach listening in, these are the questions you should be asking your leadership teams. Now, this I pulled out, we're going to do fiscal planning and quarterly planning. So assuming this is our annual planning time, the next question I would ask is, what are the fiscal and non-fiscal numbers for the next 12 months? And what that means is usually by the time we're walking into annual planning session, we have some kind of draft forecast done. It's not in stone yet because we truly haven't come up with the top priorities yet. But we might have an idea of the revenue number, the expenses, the profit, the cash, and how many widgets are we going to sell in the next fiscal year. We might have a balancing non-fiscal number. So widgets are our non-fiscal numbers. And we want to be able to, on an annual basis, in this particular case, forecast the widgets. We also want to answer the question of revenue, expenses, profit, and cash. So when I do this, and I've been working with a team as a coach, I'm going to ask for that number. Now, the teams, when I first start working with them, on an annual basis, they normally have a budget. And I'm saying that word, and I don't really appreciate the word budget because it's a license to spend, but they do usually have a budget. So I will start with that budget and we'll slowly work towards changing our language from budget to forecast. But that's where these numbers are going to come from. And I don't think I've ever worked with a team that doesn't have some idea of these numbers on an annual basis. Now, the way they got there might not have been on a very month-over-month mapped out basis, but they usually have these annual numbers. And so what we want to do is, on an easel and a piece of paper, we're going to write down revenue and how much they have written down. We're going to write down expenses and then take down that number. Profit, what they want for a profit. Cash, how much cash contribution they want in the bank. And then what the widget is and how many of those they're going to sell in the next year. And maybe there's a second widget, and we're going to write that down. Now this is up on an easel, up on a piece of paper, and we're, have it up there. It's one of our very ugly strategic pictures, but it's still a strategic picture. The next step we want to do is, on a Post-it note, I'm going to write down number 1 and stick it up just below those fiscal numbers. And then I'm going to ask the team to write down individually without any discussion. Please write down the number 1 thing, the number 1 priority that you feel must be accomplished by the company in the next fiscal year. Each leader around the table is going to take a Post-it note and a Sharpie and write down what they think the number 1 priority is. They're going to write it as a SMART priority. So, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. One by one, each leader is going to come up and present what they think the number 1 thing is. If they all say the same thing, awesome. We've got great alignment. We actually get someone to wordsmith it specific that everyone agrees to, and that becomes our number one priority. If there's 5 leaders and 5 different views, then we're going to have a really good discussion and have it out around which one should be the number one priority. That happens a lot. Sometimes we have 5 leaders and we have, two people think the same thing, the other 2 people think the same thing, and one person thinks differently. And in this particular case, it's the discussion and the way to sway each other's view to get everybody to buy into and agree to, if they're 80% or more in their thinking, agreed to the priority, it becomes the number one priority. Then we can take the priorities that then become number one and we can move them down. And then we're going to ask, should these be considered for the number 2 priority? Are there any other priorities that should be considered as a number 2 priority? If so, please take your Sharpie and Post-it note and write it down, and please bring it up one by one and present it. So then we might end up with 3 to 5 to be considered for number 2. And again, we're going to go through the same process of elimination and basically convincing on what the second most important corporate priority is. And I'm always trying to get companies to go by less is more. So if we get the right big priorities, if we get 1 and 2 and possibly a third one, then great, let's stop there. It's not about having 5 because, we should have 5. It's about having the right priorities that matter to moving the company forward in that fiscal year. So once we have agreement on priority 1, 2, 3, and if there's a 4 and 5, that's fine. Then myself as a coach, I'm going to say, so the number 1 priority is, ABC by this date. And then I'm going to ask, and who owns that? And I'm going to wait. So someone actually, no one can be voluntold at this point, but I'm going to wait for someone to volunteer. And so if it's Joey that volunteers, I write Joey down in a small Post-it note and stick it on number 1 priority is owned by Joey. Okay, who owns number 2? And again, there's lots of people who want to volunteer each other who should own what. But I'm waiting for the person who's going to own it to say their name. And if they go David's going to own number 2, great. I write Dave down. Then we go number 3, and someone says, oh, it's Judy. And I go, great. I write Judy down. The key to this is very behavioral. This is a couple things. Number 1, the whole organization, the leaders agreeing to what's important to move the company forward. Number 1, 2, and 3. The second thing is we write it down. So we write it down once. We say it out loud, we vote on it, somebody volunteers for it, they're going to write it down in their own words, and then the last thing that they're going to do in this case is they're going to type it into Metronome Growth Systems. And by the 3rd time, if they actually type in what has been written down the first time, the second time, and now they're going to type in a 3rd time, it's usually pretty good behaviorally. That's a strong priority. But if each time they're writing it down a bit different, I've seen this often, then we know that we didn't quite get it right and we need to probably talk about it a bit more. And that whoever owns it must be confident what they put into Metronome Growth Systems as the annual priority has been vetted, once by the person who wrote it down, 2nd by all the leaders, and 3rd by them again with their team agreeing to deliver on that priority. I hope that makes sense. This is a very behavioral process. We're using Post-it notes. We're getting people to write it down once by hand, so brain to hand, 2 by saying it out loud, 3 by volunteering for it, 4 by typing it into Metronome Growth Systems again. Okay, and we already talked about our non-fiscal critical numbers, but what I like to do here is then take that, fiscal critical number for the company for the year and say, what's the super green target? We've already said what the green target is. What happens if it's yellow? What's the yellow target? And what's the red target? Meaning we need to pre-plan what's going to happen if we don't achieve our green number. If we overachieve it, what are we going to do? Because there could be implications to hiring sooner, buying sooner, all those things. If we underachieve yellow or red, what are we going to do? And so to have that discussion before the year starts is very, very important. From there, we're going to roll to our quarter. And if we're doing annual planning, we're going to actually plan our Q1. And we're going to take directly from what we said for, our fiscal numbers. Now, we're not going to divide by 12 and come up with a quarterly number. If the company hasn't mapped out month by month by month, we might do that because that will be good enough for this moment in time. But then as a coach and as leaders, we need to go back and map out month over month for 12 months. We cannot have an annual plan unless we map out our results that we want for the next 12 months. So in this case, we're going to take the first 3 months of the year, total up the revenue, the expenses, the profit, how much cash will be in the bank at the end of that quarter, and how many widgets are we going to sell that quarter. And we're going to write that down. And what I like to do even further is when we get the quarterly number, I like to show, and it's been really great in Metronome Growth Systems, be able to show that in the metrics area on a month over month basis. So now we have our fiscal and non-fiscal numbers for the next quarter. And now we're going to do the exact same process as what we did for our annual. I'm going to ask the team, please take marker, take a Post-it note individually, write down what's the number one thing that must get accomplished in the next quarter. Please write it as a SMART priority. Each leader is going to write it down. We're going to wait for all the leaders to write it down. And then I'm going to ask each one of them to come up and put it on the easel board for review. And we're going to group them up as they, some of them might be aligned, but it might not be exactly the same. And then we're going to have a really good rock'em sock'em discussion around what is going to be, what do we agree upon to be number one. We're going to move those other priorities down a level. And then we're going to ask, should these be considered to be number 2 to 5? And then we're going to ask for any other priorities at that time. If so, please write them down and bring them up and explain them. And then we're going to go through that same process of agreeing or not agreeing to the priorities. Now, what I have up on the board is an easel that has our revenue, expenses, profit, cash, how many widgets we're going to sell in that quarter, and then here are the top priorities we're going to accomplish in the next 90 days. Number 1, 2, 3. From there, then I'm going to ask who owns number 1. I'm waiting for someone to volunteer, not to be voluntold. And number 2 and number 3, and we're going to take a smaller Post-it note, write their name on it, and put it up. Okay, now we have our quarterly priorities. Great. Okay, so we're working through it. From there, in order to really drive it home, we need to get and align our operational forecast. So that's our 12-month forecast, our 1-year forecast, with our 90-day plan, our annual plan and our 90-day plan. And over time, as we know in our 3HAG, we're going to drive this forward to a 36-month rolling forecast, right? But we have to, crawl and then walk before we run. So why I'm tying this back to the 36-month forecast that's widget-based is that if we already have a 12-month forecast that maybe isn't widget-based when you start working through this, maybe it's just revenue month over month, we want to drive out the widgets we just came up with in that quarter and say in the first 3 months, we said we're going to sell this many widgets. How does that break down? And start lining up, our revenue and our expenses and our profit and our cash. So, most people who see a 36-month widget-based forecast usually runs. It's very challenging to do this. So it gets even scarier when you start breaking it down function by function, month by month, all the way out 36 months. Now, I'm not here to scare you away from doing this whatsoever. I'm here to say that if you have built up a prioritized plan with these fiscal numbers and widgets, we need to line it back to where we're going. And so the best way I know how to do this, that we actually played with my team through a lot of trial and error, and now as a coach, working with many teams, one of the best things we can do is we can take a 12-month forecast and start breaking it down into a month-over-month forecast, and then breaking it down to a functional month-over-month forecast. So I've seen lots of companies do this. I think is excellent. But then what they miss when they get to this level is then again, we're not tying the assumptions we made in those priorities directly back to the financials. And so where we went from there is we started thinking about, and this came out of Mastering the Rockefeller Habits 13-week race. We took that sheet that was originally proposed for each and every corporate 90-day priority, and we actually created a map, a 13-week map. And what we did is we said, look, every quarter is 13 weeks, and every Friday we should be somewhere, we should hit some milestone for the quarter on this forecasted amount of widgets we're going to sell, revenue we're going to make, and of course the progress on our priorities. So we then, down the left-hand side there, we decided what the widgets were going to be and what the priorities were going to be. And then we had to map out every Friday where we were going to be on achieving each of the priorities and the forecasted widget number for the quarter. And so we would map all of this out before the quarter started. And the good news about mapping that out is that what we learned by doing this a lot of times is a couple of things. Number one is that when we map out 13 weeks and then we have a great priority set as number one, and we look to say, week one we're going to do this, week two, week three, week four, sometimes we run out of weeks to actually accomplish that priority in the quarter. Other times we recognize that we didn't plan that someone was going to take a 2-week vacation, or that we were going to be on the road on a road show for 2 weeks in the quarter that was going to affect our ability to achieve that priority, or maybe even make our fiscal numbers. So this just gives us one more level of granularity and human behavior to actually ensure that what we say we're going to do, we can actually do. And so by mapping it week over week and putting up on the wall, I encourage my clients to do it physically with Post-it notes up on the wall, and keep it up on the wall for the quarter, and ensure that it's talked about in every weekly meeting every Monday. In our case, our weekly meetings were every Monday. And so this is what it would look like if we're going to do it with Post-it notes. And we're going to put in the widgets. This is a pair data example. So number of new merchants, number of cumulative merchants, our monthly recurring revenue number, our cash in the bank. That's what we are going to measure. And then our priorities. And we're going to map that out week over week. Our priorities: close a Canadian bank reseller by 12/31/18, map and implement merchant setup in 75 days. And then there's a date there. And then have the Paradata specification version 1 complete by 12/31/18. Okay, so then from there, we put the names of who owned what. And then each of those owners would be responsible for mapping out the milestones that ended each Friday of each week in that quarter. And so then we're going to end up, I blurred this out on purpose, but we're going to end up with a really nice week over week mapping of what our forecasted numbers are and milestones are for each of the priorities. This is one of the key ways for two things. One, to get clarity and confidence in achieving your plan and making sure the steps we're taking are where we want to go and we can do it in a timely fashion. The second thing is, and why this is so important to tying it back to our 3HAG, is most people will not want to immediately do a widget-based forecast for 36 months. We know that. Humanly, it's very hard to get our head around it. But most teams can do a widget-based forecast for 13 weeks. I've never not been able to accomplish this with a client. And once this gets written down, the client gets better and better. So the companies are getting better at execution. The better the companies get at execution, the easier and more time they have to spend on looking out and mapping out and ensuring they're heading in the right direction towards their 3-year highly achievable goal. So that's why this is a strategic execution system, and it really comes all the way down into the quarter in a week-over-week forecasted plan, and then tracking your progress and making better, faster decisions on where you want to go. So that's strategy and execution. That's all about our strategic execution system. And that actually ties into the communication framework, meeting by meeting. This actually helps us from our daily, our weekly, our monthly, our quarterly, and our annual meetings that we need to have with our leadership team. It drives directly towards the agendas that are outlined in the 3HAG way, and it supports each and every one of those steps. But we've got to get granular right down to 13 weeks, week over week, when we're talking about execution. We can't just go part of the way there. In order to get really good at the 3-year highly achievable goal and achieving it every year as it rolls towards us, we have to get good at mapping out what 90 days look like in week over week in a 13-week race. So the more we actually align our execution and get better and better at that process, the easier it gets to spend time on strategy. And the more time we spend on strategy, the more confident we get. The more confident we get, the easier it is to make great execution decisions quickly. I can't stress that enough. That is the system we're looking to put in place, not only for the leadership team, of course starts with the leadership team, but the better the leadership team gets at it, the better the rest of the company will get at it as well. So this is the best way to keep rolling our 3HAG forward. So what's our homework? Our homework is, I want you to go and review your current plan. I want you to look at it, and I want you to see, is that plan taken down all the way into the quarter, week over week? Are there specific owners of the corporate priorities, and that do these priorities align to our 1HAG and our 3HAG? Are the priorities specific enough? Meaning, if you were to achieve it, you would know how to celebrate that priority. You are clear on how you would celebrate that priority. You are clear that you know exactly how that priority will be achieved. And I say that over and over and over again because I see lots of priorities written like, we are going to continue to improve on sales. That is not a priority. That you are going to argue about that at the end of the quarter. We want to be specific. We are going to improve the sales process by adding or removing X amount of days in our sales cycle, something like that. Okay, and I try and get rid of the words in any priorities: continue, improve, evolve. They need to be completed, implemented by, how much, those kind of things. And does everyone in the company know why they are working on a specific priority? That's a great question to ask. So that's your homework, okay? And if you're a coach working through this, go look at your clients' plans with these questions. If you're a company looking at this, go look at your plans and make sure that you have an annual plan with specific priorities and measures. And we have a 90-day plan with specific measures and priorities. And we have a 13-week race mapped out to ensure that we're going to execute well against where we want to go. Okay, so to wrap it up, we know that we're pulling together everything on the left-hand side of the 3HAG is all about our foundation, our cultural system. It's all to do with our long term where we're going, right? To the right of the 3HAG is our near term. It's like right now is our 30-day, 90-day individual, 90-day corporate, and our 1-year annual. And all these things that we individually are doing every day must line up to where we want to go 3 years from now. If we don't see where we're driving the bus to, it's really hard to make great decisions on what we should do day in and day out. Cannot stress that enough. So this is our growth system. We have 6 systems, and we really want to ensure that these systems work together. That's why today was strategy and execution. And the 3HAG is the way to bring it all together. And you know the swim lanes start at Q1 and they go to Q12. And we want to check in each and every quarter, each and every year, that we are taking the appropriate steps with the things that are working on around us externally and the pressures we have internally to, no matter what, drive the company to where we want to be in 3 years' time. So we're going to get better at predictability. I know that the companies I'm working with are better each and every day, week, month, quarter, year on predicting, because they are actually practicing getting better at this. And it starts by our 1-page growth plan and married up with our 36-month detailed forecast. So as always, the recording will be available. The slides and tools, there's not many tools for this session today, other than the questions that will be there in the slides. I literally have been using those questions for almost 20 years. Since I first learned the Rockefeller habits, those are the questions that my team and I have been using to actually create our plans. These are the questions I've been using with the teams I'm working with to create their plans. So the next session, so the first Tuesday of every month is our year 2. Our part 2 session will be on February 5th at 9 a.m. Pacific, and it's going to be on the key process flow map level 2. I'm looking forward to this because when we went through the key process flow map level 1, it's always a great start. I always love getting companies to there, but I've been working with a lot of my companies through the key process flow map level 2. It's been highly effective, as it was for my own companies, it is for theirs as well. And it's a way to get great clarity and lots of names up on the board so that we can share the functional load of actually driving towards our 3HAG. So I hope that you're going to join us February 5th, 9 a.m. Pacific. If you can't make it, the recording will be available. As you know, other resources available. The book's out there in 3 media types: hard copy, Kindle, and Audible. I asked you in the last session of year 1, part 11, asked for some reviews to be written. If you love the book, thank you very much to those who have already taken that on. I would love, if anyone has time and you love the book, to write a review on Amazon. It's super helpful to get the word out there so we can impact many companies and get them attracted to this process and the success of this process. So we've been doing lots of things. I think the biggest thing that has changed on this slide is that we have lots of client workshops lined up for 2019 happening all over the US. Please see the website for the dates and where they're happening. I've partnered up with lots of different coaches to bring these workshops to their clients. but they're also open to anyone listening in. If they're in the right particular area, please seek out the registration and get your team registered. We know teams that learn together win together. Again, one last plug for the Coach Cert program. There are 10 spots left, and then we're gonna hold there for a while. That's why there are no more certification training that goes past May. So if you're interested, you're thinking about it, please reach out either to someone on my team or just fill in the application at our website. So thank you again. We're super excited to kick off the year as Metronome United, focusing on growing leaders, driving 3 hags, and impacting lives. So if you have more questions, don't hesitate to contact me. I look forward to our next session on the Key Process Flow Map Level 2. I hope everyone has a great 3 hag year. Thanks so much. Talk to you next time.